By the way,
Recording in progress.
Is it Kayla Giles or Kayla Giles?
It's Giles.
Giles. Okay, nobody's been sure about that. All right, so my name is Marc Victor. This is Andy Marcantel. We're attorneys with the Attorneys for Freedom law firm. And today we have a Zoom call with Kayla Giles. And Kayla, we talked a little bit before we put this on, and I asked you if it was okay if we recorded this discussion. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Also, I know that you have an appeal pending in your case. You're currently incarcerated, right?
Correct.
And you have an appeal pending, and we don't represent you on the appeal or anything else. So there's no attorney-client privilege here. And so I want to make sure that you don't say anything that could cause a problem with your appeal. And I'm not really intimate with the facts of your case. So I'm not really in a position to say, hold on, Kayla, don't say that. I'm assuming you're intimate with the facts of your own case and you know the kinds of things that are in question and things that you shouldn't say. And you should assume, by the way, that anything you say probably is being listened to right now, right, by the people at the prison facility and could be sent to the prosecutor in the case who's running the appeal. So we want to be careful to stay completely away from that. Our interest is really in finding out what happened with the USCCA situation. I've told you that Tim Schmidt put a video out fairly recently where he explained USCCA's reasons, I guess, for dropping your case. Surprised me. I don't know if they were true or not true because, again, I haven't really gone into the facts of the case. I will say that Andy and I both spoke with your first criminal defense attorney, the one that USCCA paid $50,000. And then dropped him, stopped paying him, and dropped you, I guess, refused to pay for the case. And I'll just let you know what he told us. He told us essentially that he thought it was a good case of self-defense, and he was excited about it and wanted to defend you. You know, I've been practicing criminal law for 30 years now, and he struck me as a very competent, qualified criminal defense lawyer. He's been around a long time, done a lot of these types of cases. And so it was shocking to me to hear him say, I don't know why USCCA dropped Kayla because I thought it was a good case. They never really gave me a reason. So anything else you want to say about that?
I guess, Kayla, where I want to start, and I think where maybe a lot of people are curious, are you aware of the public backlash against USCCA associated with dropping your case? Do you know the scope of it? Have you heard anything about it?
No, sir, I don't.
Wow. USCCA took a lot of flack for dropping you. A lot of flack from a lot of people, and they released certain statements about kind of justifying their actions, why they made that decision. But a lot of time when we're dealing with this human element, right, we're dealing with a human being who's in custody who maybe doesn't have access to the internet all the time or doesn't have access to the media. It's really good to kind of reflect on that from the get-go and understand that a lot of time people don't know what's going on and don't know the full story when they're incarcerated. They don't know everything that's going on in the outside world. It's surprising to me, but I guess at the same time, I'm not surprised to hear that.
Okay, so I guess that sort of brings you up to speed. Also, I should tell you, Andy and I have a program that competes with the USCCA. Ours is called Attorneys on Retainer. We're not an insurance company. We're a law firm. The Attorneys for Freedom is a pro-freedom private law firm that's been in existence 27 years. So we've been doing these kinds of cases. And people contract directly with our firm, and we represent them. If they try to act in self-defense and the thing happened after they signed up, we defend them. And if they're charged with a crime, no problem, even if they screwed it up. So we don't say, oh, sorry, doesn't look like a valid act of self-defense. I mean, if you're charged, there's an argument it's not a valid act of self-defense, right? I mean, so we don't play those games. We just defend people. So, yeah, this whole controversy came up. And what we've been saying thus far is we talked to your attorney, and he told us he thought it was a valid act of self-defense. So we wanted to reach out to you. And again, keeping in mind, you got an appeal pending, so we don't want to go through the facts of the case. And as I said, you need to a little bit be the guardian of that because there's no attorney-client privilege here because we don't represent you. So
I want to be even more clear than Marc just was. We are very critical of not only USCCA, but all of these kind of insurance-backed self-defense programs. And we have a bias. We have a competing program that's not insurance-based. It's law firm-based. And so that allows us to represent more types of cases and not have to exclude people. So I just wanted you to know kind of our bias in this conversation right off the bat.
Okay, so I know you're upset with USCCA because you sued them, right? And you lost, and the reason you lost is because you were convicted of a crime, and their policy says they don't cover criminal acts. So that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, this is part of the problem here if you're convicted or if you take a plea, and lots of people take pleas, and they even say themselves, all coverage ends. So what is it you wanted to say about your experience with USCCA? I mean, maybe you can walk us through that, like when you signed up, what kind of member you were, those kinds of things.
Well, I purchased the insurance the same day that I purchased the gun. Actually, beforehand, I was on their website. They have a lot of information about weapons that they would recommend, ammo that they would recommend for self-defense. I did a lot of reading before I actually went and purchased the gun. And of course, later in trial, that was used as my plot, as they say. But
hold on a second. You say that was used. Did the prosecutor got information from USCCA that they used in your case, or no?
No, just from my computer or cell phone. I don't even remember which one they were looking through, but it was a Mac. It's all connected anyway.
Did they ever try to subpoena USCCA to get information from them about what they knew about you, or do you know?
I believe they did. I'm not sure if anything was ever given to them. I did notice Paul Cormouche, the first attorney that I had, the document that he had brought in to show me at one point listed the contract date with USCCA. And it was dated like a year before I had even purchased the policy. So right off the bat, I thought that was kind of strange because it was showing, I'm pretty sure it said 2017, 16 or 17, and I had purchased it only in 2018. So that alone was kind of strange.
So I'm clear. You're saying the USCCA policy had the incorrect date on it. It was earlier than you actually signed up?
Correct.
That's strange.
By a year or more.
Wow. Okay.
So it made me wonder, well, did they get me mixed up with somebody else in other areas as well? I'm not even sure.
How long before the incident occurred did you actually join the USCCA?
It maybe I don't even think it was 2 weeks.
Okay.
To be honest, I really don't think it was.
Would it be accurate to say that the reason you purchased the firearm is because you were having problems with your ex or soon-to-be ex or something?
That's correct. That's the only reason why I purchased it. Okay. I actually didn't even know such insurance existed. A couple years before that, I had taken a concealed carry class in Texas. That's where my license was. And we had a representative that came in and spoke with us about such insurance. But at that time, when I completed the course, I didn't have my own handgun. My husband had one, but I didn't own one myself. So I didn't see the need of purchasing a policy if I'm not actively carrying at the time. So when I did decide that I wanted to purchase a handgun, I remembered that that policy. I did a Google search on the top ones, and USCCA came up as one of the top searches. And like I said, after reading on their website, they seemed like a reputable company.
And the reason you decided to carry was because of problems that were occurring with was he husband at the time, or he was displaying some?
He was, yes.
And he displaying some violence, or you had concerns about that or something?
Yeah, the biggest one was he decided he was going to start carrying a handgun just to custody exchanges, and that kind of made me feel uncomfortable. Well, definitely uncomfortable, but I felt like he was trying to provoke me so that he could kill me. And I even mentioned it at one of our custody hearings. I asked the judge that, she would give me a temporary restraining order, and told her, he's been doing some weird things, following me, stalking me, having other people do the same. And then he started carrying this weapon, and really it's like an episode of Snapped, unfolding. So I felt that was appropriate. But after the hearing, she didn't tell me yes, no. So I had a class that I was attending in Dallas a few days after that hearing. After the class was finished, I purchased a gun, I purchased the insurance, came back home. We're still having these issues. And then that day happens. I didn't see where I did anything wrong. I followed everything by the book. As soon as I had, knowing my handgun was licensed in Texas, because that's where I had to buy it from, because my concealed carry permit was there. My driver's license was still in Texas. Before I even left, I researched the laws in Louisiana so I would know, can I even carry that gun in Louisiana? Is it legal? All of those things are what they used as to say that I was plotting to kill him.
I see.
And it's not. It was my deal, what I had to do as a gun owner to even know if I could carry, or what's the difference in the laws in Texas and Louisiana, because I was only trained in Texas. So it's just a really sad little situation to be stuck in.
Yeah, on that note of, you're purchasing, when you start having problems with him, that's when you're looking into self-defense insurance, things like that. That makes perfect sense to me. And this is part of the narrative that some people who are maybe USCCA apologists who are defending their decision to disclaim liability for you and ultimately, in our opinion, trash you. They say, well, the fact that she bought it shortly before the incident and that's when she got the gun and everything like that. It's always made perfect sense to me that you start taking precautions for self-defense when you start having a problem, when the situation escalates. Right. In fact, we have people, I just had one person call yesterday who's an AOR client, and they were saying, Andy, I'm just starting to have problems with this new neighbor that moved in, and I'm worried for my safety. He just moved in a couple of weeks ago. I want to start taking precautions. It's not suspicious or anything to me that you want to start taking more precautions and getting more things in place when the issue starts. So that's something that's always baffled me about why people are saying, oh, well, she's plotting, obviously, but that's just my opinion.
Kayla, did you testify at your trial?
No, I didn't. And the reason for that, the second attorney that I had to hire, because obviously I couldn't afford Paul Carmouche, anymore. He felt that my statement to the police at that time, which was also recorded, they played that during trial. They actually were provided a written copy to read along. He felt that was no different than what I would say on the stand. So he said it didn't make any sense for me to get on the stand and tell it again.
Understood. So what was in that statement? I mean, that came in at trial. So if you just tell us what was in that statement, I don't think you're going outside of what's already in the record. If you don't mind.
I'll say this. I've always been an open book about this. There's nothing for me to hide. I don't mind saying anything because I've been honest with them from the beginning. They're the ones, and they, as in Attorney General's office, were the ones that have always tried to twist it. I told the detective that day when we had this little article, we were supposed to just go for a custody exchange. That's all it was going to be. All right. The children exit my vehicle. They get in his vehicle. He started yelling and wanting to argue about something. I don't know. I just immediately said, nope, we're not doing this. Turned around. Whenever I got into the vehicle, I was trying to lock the door, and
but let me make sure I understand. Your kids are now in his vehicle, and you're back in your vehicle. You locked the door. He's out of his vehicle and still wanting to argue with you?
Right. Well, I didn't even get a chance to lock the door because as soon as I turned around to go to the vehicle, he followed me. And had he just been a split second slower, he would not have been shot. But before I could even lock the door, he jerked it open. And when he opened it and leaned in, that's when I picked up the gun out of the cup holder on the side of my door and I fired one shot. And even the coroner took the stand, said yes, that it was fired, it's dead center, but it was also in a leaning position, the trajectory. So everything and it was recorded. The Sonic, it was in a Walmart parking lot, but the Sonic that was a little bit closer had a better view, and you can see all of this on the surveillance.
Yeah, we've never seen the video. It's not been released to my knowledge. We've been trying to get it so we could see what happened, but it's still not available. So if I understand this correctly, it sounds like, and tell me if I got it wrong, that probably the prosecutor said, okay, maybe she had a right to use self-defense because he's threatening her, but she used too much force. She shouldn't have used deadly physical force. Maybe she could have punched him in the face or pushed him or something like that. Is that roughly the argument at trial or no?
Yes, that's one of them. They mainly focused on me trying to plan it because I have a dark sense of humor, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not even going to say I haven't. I've told him some very colorful things, and it's all fun and joking until he actually dies. And then, of course, oh, you said you were going to kill him, and you did. Well, I've said I was going to kill a lot of people. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm planning to do that.
What types of things came out at trial where they were trying to establish that you were planning? I had something about like internet searches or something like that.
Yeah, I believe it was my phone. It wasn't even the computer. They had a search about USCCA, of course. Can you pick your own attorney with USCCA? Things that I was finding on their website, and then I would like narrow my search on Google. They found when I looked up the Louisiana statutes for justifiable homicide, there was another case in Louisiana. I want to say a couple years before that. I read about that one on there. They brought those up. They also brought up that I had filed an intent to relocate in Florida, that I was supposed to, or I had maybe served him or was in the process of typing it. I can't even remember, but they brought that up as well. Well, if I'm planning to kill somebody, why am I sending them a legal document saying that I'm planning to move to another state? You know, little things like that weren't really connected. I think that was pretty, I mean, that was pretty much it as far as what they found on the computer that they tried to say was my big plot. I did have a friend that before I went to Texas, but I'm saying it's after that custody hearing, when the judge didn't tell me yes or no as to whether or not she was going to give me a restraining order, I asked a friend if I could borrow her handgun until, I could get to Dallas to buy my own. And she said yes. She drove from Monroe all the way to where I was staying in Alexandria, which is about 2 hours, gave me the gun. But then when I get arrested, well, she took it back with her after that. But when I get arrested, she's interviewed, and then all of a sudden that part is never told. She says that I did ask her for the gun, and she claims that I told her I was going to kill him. But if she was serious, if she really thought I was serious about that, why would you give me the gun? It was just a big mess. So you're altogether.
You're essentially one of these people who says stuff like, I'm going to kill you, those kinds of things. And they used those prior statements against you at trial as if it was a statement of your sort of premeditation in terms of I'm planning to kill this guy.
But that also doesn't seem consistent to me with an actual plot that you want to be successful. If you're plotting somebody's death and you want to, get away with it, you don't warn them that you're about to commit the act beforehand. So I'm not even sure these different theories and lines of evidence are consistent in my view.
I feel like she left that part out because they may have threatened her that she would be, charged with obstruction or principal or whatever the case, because she did have an attorney present with her before the interview, which was a close friend of the attorney that I would later use. And in trial, neither side actually asked her about that.
Wow. So tell us about your USCCA experience. I mean, what are your thoughts? How were you treated over there? What do you have to say about that?
Initially, I thought they were great. I did exactly, what they say to do on their website, which is to, as soon as an incident occurs, call the police, call 911, be brief, tell them, you just need the ambulance, the police, hang up. That was also used against me later, but
what was used against you? That you called USCCA?
That I called USCCA after the incident.
They brought
But you got to remember, this is fresh on my mind. Like I just bought the policy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they said to do. And
so they used that trial against you, the fact that you called USCCA because they're not a law firm. Did you speak to an attorney right away, or did you speak to a non-attorney?
It was whoever answers that 1-800 number. And I just told them, I was real brief. I said, I had an incident. And at that time, the police were walking up and they were asking, where the guns at and stuff. So I had to hang up. They kept calling back. And of course, I had their number saved. So you can see who's calling, and the police had my phone. So yes, in trial, they made that look bad. Like, I don't know. That's what they told me to do, is to call the police first, call them. That way they'll have an attorney set up, and we go from there, and not to speak to anybody without an attorney. Right. But as soon as I walk into the interview room, they're telling me, if you don't talk, we're going to charge you with second-degree murder. So I'm like, well, crap. And when I said, okay, well, I'll talk. So they come back in, and that's one of the first things I reminded them in the statement was, I'm only talking to you because you said you were going to charge me with second-degree murder if I didn't.
You didn't have an attorney at that point?
No, I just went ahead and told him everything that happened. Me and the detective kind of argued a little bit, and I feel like he was not satisfied that he couldn't trip me up in what I was saying because I was being honest. And it didn't matter because they had already had it in their mind they were going to arrest me regardless.
Right. Yeah, no, this is such a downside of not having an attorney right there to talk to you. Not only is it used against you that you call USCCA, you don't get the legal advice that you need right there.
Which is generally, if you talk to any criminal defense attorney worth their salt, they're going to tell you, don't talk to the police. They're going to say they're going to come up to you, they're going to ask to talk to you, invoke your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and all questioning must cease at that point as soon as you say, I want my attorney, I won't talk to you without an attorney. People don't understand this. All questioning must cease at that point. It's a violation of your constitutional rights. And the issue is that many courts have given the police a lot of leeway in doing their investigations, even going so far as to say, you can threaten them to a certain extent. You can lie to them to a certain extent to get them talking. If it means getting them talking, courts have given cops a lot of leeway. So had you talked to a criminal defense attorney in that moment while the cops were walking up, the unequivocal advice would have been, don't talk to the police. Do not give them a statement, and maybe even hand the phone to the cops and let me talk to them real quick, and I can figure out what's going on. I'll invoke your rights for you.
Yeah, they didn't give you any legal advice. The person you spoke to at USCCA didn't pass along any legal advice to you? Nothing?
No, they just said that they would call me back.
Okay.
And they did 4 or 5 times after that, but I couldn't answer. So when I got to jail, after I was already booked in, I called a family member and asked that person, please contact them and ask them to get me an attorney.
So they're great at the beginning. They give you Paul. Yeah. Paul does a great job. He's excited about the case, right? I know, because I talked to him. He thought it was a great case. He must have had you really pumped up to defend this case. Did USCCA say we're going to pay for experts and investigators and all that stuff too?
I don't know exactly what all they told him. They didn't tell me anything. The only time I spoke to them was that day when I called them. I've not had any contact with them since. Everything else was done through him. And I know after a couple months, he just said that they weren't willing to pay any more than the $50. And I think around that time was when either the autopsy report had come through, or maybe the children, my 2 oldest daughters, had given statements, and USCCA didn't even have their statements before they decided they were no longer going to pay.
So those statements were favorable for you?
Yes.
And USCCA didn't have or even review those statements before they turned down the case?
No. And I remember Paul saying, well, I'm going to submit these to them and see if that will change their mind. Because my oldest daughter said, she said the door was shut. He opened the door. He leaned in. She said he jumped at me. But her statement was identical to mine. The detectives even said that they could not find anything to contradict the statements that I made or that those children made or the video itself.
Did you shoot?
But here I am. So.
Did you shoot through the door or did you shoot him directly?
No. When he jerked that door open, there was a gap probably about like this big.
And you shot through the gap, not through the door.
No, it was him.
Yeah, because
in the V.
A lot of people think that you shot through a closed door, but you're saying that's not the case.
No, my window was rolled up. I had tinted windows. You can see all this on the surveillance camera. It's all black. You can see everything. He opened the door and I shot him through that gap the open gap of the door.
So I want to ask about your attorney providing the USCCA information and evidence in real time. So do you know what that arrangement was? Because you're saying that he had to provide them with pieces of the case, the autopsy report, things like that?
Yes, that was Paul that was having to do that.
Do you know who he was working do you know who he was working with at USCCA? Was it part of the insurance company? Was it actually somebody at USCCA? Who was he sending your documents to?
I have no idea.
And whoever that person was just had the decision making that once they received the documents, they could at any time, and maybe even before receiving everything, make a decision to just say, no, we're not covering it anymore.
Right. And I don't understand how that's even possible.
And in this case, your lawyer, the one they paid $50,000, the one that USCCA paid $50,000 to, is actually advocating for you to say to USCCA or the insurance company, hey, there's some more statements that you guys haven't even reviewed that you should review because it's actually a good case of self-defense, and still they declined to pay any more money for him.
That's right.
Wow.
And at that point, he said maybe it's being that it's a small town and you should find somebody just that knows the ropes around there, knows these judges, these prosecutors, how they work.
How did he break that to you? How did that feel when he told you about that they were disclaiming?
I had no choice. If they're not paying, then it had to come out of my pocket. So that, of course, leaves you with less options. And from what I understand, Paul takes a lot of cases from USCCA, or at least did back then. And he even told me if it had happened in North Louisiana, because he was a prosecutor for 40 years, the district attorney, if I'm not mistaken. And he said it was a case that he would not have prosecuted.
Wow.
So that was, comforting at first, but
yeah.
That is not what happened after.
So
the fact.
what happened to you? Were you able to afford an attorney, or did you get a public defender? What happened?
I did have enough money to hire, which I thought was one of the best attorneys in that area. And I don't know if he just wanted to keep it in that area or that parish because he knew so many people in there. I'm not sure, but it was tainted from the beginning. And I think if I would have continued with Paul, I think Paul would have noticed that, with all of the news media and everything that was going on, I think Paul would have had that moved out of that parish a lot sooner instead of continuing and pulling that jury and everything through there, which is a lot of the basis of the appeal is issues that were going on with that jury.
In other words, a change of venue. Did you request a change?
Correct.
Did you guys request a change of venue?
No, the attorney that I had felt that it should stay right there. And I still can't understand why. But I think somebody like Paul, who has been prosecuting or been a district attorney for so long, he would have noticed that. And actually, Paul did tell me from the beginning that that's one of the things that he would have to do if it got too bad, or if it continued to be so bad with as far as the news reporting on every single little thing that was going on.
Yeah, and we have more reason to believe that Paul might have attempted something like that, especially when he tells you, hey, look,
Right.
I was a prosecutor for 40 years in a different parish, and we wouldn't have even touched this case. We wouldn't have charged her at all if this was in a different parish. So, yeah, there's reason to believe he would have at least attempted to move the venue.
So other than the failure to file a motion for change of venue, how do you feel about the job that the lawyer who tried the case, and I'm assuming the guy you hired, this is the guy who tried the case, how did he do for you? I mean, I recognize you lost the case, but do you think he did a good job for you at trial? Did he put everything out there? I mean, did the kids come in and testify and talk about their statements or no?
Yeah, that's funny all on its own. The whole purpose of having the children taken to an advocacy center and statements giving right after the scene is to preserve their testimony. Okay. Now, mind you, my daughter has been with an ex-husband for the last 4 or 5 years since this incident occurred before trial. And they did call her in to testify, and they asked her some of the same questions that they asked her in that interview. And of course, her answers have changed. Now, all of a sudden, he was moving really slow to towards the vehicle, and that he was such a great guy, and all these things that why do we even have my daughter on the stand if several years later, when she gave you a statement right after it happened, that I felt like was just to confuse the jury. The prosecutor even high-fived her when she got off of the stand, which
so your
just
daughter,
blows my mind.
your daughter turned against you at trial?
They twisted what she said is how I took it. I'm assuming they told her not to even look my direction because she did it the whole time. They tried to hide the view between me and her with a TV screen. And then, of course, at sentencing, the judge reamed me over this, saying that I'm so cold and emotionless and all these bad things because I didn't even cry or show any sign of care when my daughter was on the stand. It's just a complete nightmare. But they did read or let them view the videos at trial. They did get to see what she said. The middle one, I don't even remember them giving her statement. I think my appellate attorney is the one that finally, introduced some of the things that she was saying. It was introduced in evidence, but they didn't show the video and read it out loud as they did with the oldest daughter.
Yeah.
So
how much time did you get?
Life sentence, no parole, plus 30 years consecutive for a computer. The computer that I had, excuse me, when all of this was going on, it was a $2,500 MacBook. All right. And it was a present from him. He was asking me about that MacBook, I want to say a month or so prior to all of these, or to the shooting at least. And I thought that maybe he was going to try to say that I stole it or something, just because he was trying to get me arrested for everything. So I asked my sister to hold on to the laptop, and I needed it because I had just been served with something else that he was trying to do in court. He wasn't happy with 50-50 custody. So I needed it to respond to that. And I asked her, I want to say it was the day before the shooting, maybe a couple of days before the shooting, to bring me the laptop back. And she forgot. Now, because she didn't bring it back when I asked, and I get arrested, on the jail phone, we were talking about it, and she's like, what do you want me to do with this computer? So I told her to give it to the friend who would later testify against me. And because I was being kind of secretive about what it was in a flour bag, so they like to use that, they thought it was something of importance. It wasn't. It was just, that's a $2,500 laptop, and if y'all aren't subpoenaing and looking for any of my electronics, then why give it to you if you're not asking for it? That's all I meant by that. I never said go hide it, go dump it, throw it away or anything like that. I just said give it to a friend of mine.
Was that like an obstruction charge or something?
That was an obstruction.
I see.
For that one simple act of telling her to give it to a friend, and it all could have been avoided if my sister would have remembered to bring it back to the house that day. And I'm not saying it's her fault. It's kind of ironic.
Who's doing the appeal? Is it the public defender, or have you hired somebody to do the appeal?
No, I hired Jane Hogan out of Hammond, Louisiana. She's probably one of the best ones in the state, if not the best.
Excellent. And what's the status of the appeal? Have the briefs been filed? Has it been argued?
Right now, we're waiting on the Louisiana Supreme Court to decide if they're going to take the case or not.
So it was denied on the appeal, and then you guys have petitioned the Supreme Court to review it, that denial, and then I'm sure you're going to, if they don't take it, you're going to file a habeas over at the federal court, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I've said it from the beginning. She said if we win, more than likely they'll offer a deal. Yeah. And I tell her and tell every one of them, I don't care if you offer me probation, I'm never going to take it, because I don't feel that I did anything wrong. I still stand behind my decision. I did everything legal as I was supposed to, and I don't feel like I should have that record following me when I followed the laws that the state of Louisiana set.
And then you also brought a lawsuit against USCCA, right?
Right, because they breached the contract and failed to pay. Because I was stuck in the parish jail for a year or so on $1 million bond. I mean, the money that I used to hire that new attorney, I could have used to bond myself out. But all of everything that they promise, them backing out like that, it prolonged my time there, and it affected me being able to represent myself and help them collect evidence.
Right.
Or
you were stuck in jail, so you couldn't help the defense attorney to prepare your case because USCCA didn't put any money up for the bond. And you had contracted. Correct. Were you the highest level member over there?
Platinum membership is what it was the highest membership is what I had purchased.
And they didn't give you anything for bond?
No, nothing. They they denied coverage after, I want to say it was only a month or two. I wasn't in there long at all. They issued that first amount to Paul, and after that, it was a wrap.
They didn't even post the bond at that point because you were sitting. He's representing you for a month. In that time, they still never posted the bond.
No, they did not.
Wow. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I feel, wow. I understand I feel like I got a much better understanding of what the case is about. It sounds like the question, or the main question, is going to be, even if you had a right to defend yourself, did you use more force than was reasonably necessary because you used a firearm, rather than sort of an escalation of force? On the other hand, I don't know how big he is, and you're sitting down, you're in a vulnerable position, how angry he is. The question in my mind is, are you at risk of at least a serious physical injury? And to me, that's the question at trial. And, those can go either way on these kinds of cases. So I sure hope you have success on your appeal. Is there anything else you want to say about your experience, either with USCCA or how the case went at trial, that you want people to know about?
A lot of things. The most important, I guess, is just don't talk to them. Don't talk to police when something like this happens, because every single thing you say will be twisted. And at trial, I learned it's not, they don't necessarily present the truth. They present all these different theories, and it's just whatever that they can get the jury to believe. And as horrible as that sounds, it's a big risk to go into trial. But I believe if you know you're right, stick with it, fight it all the way through.
What do you say to the people, to the 800,000 people who are currently signed up with the United States Concealed Carry Association on the promise that if you get into one of these problems, they're going to have your back?
You're stupid. I would find another company because you could be sitting here in prison just like me, and it will cost you a ton more to defend it on your own. It's just not worth it.
Most people wouldn't even have the means to do what you're doing. Right. Hiring private lawyers, having good lawyers on your case. Yeah, most people who join these programs aren't even able to afford something like that.
Kayla, when you talk to your lawyer, we've done a whole bunch of appeals at our firm. We've done lots of murder cases and things like that as well. So tell your lawyer, if she wants to bounce some ideas off of us or anything like that, she can just reach out. Just have her Google Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm, and we'd be anything we can do to help. Happy to have a conversation with her.
And we won't charge you a dime, right, because you've already paid way too much for attorneys as it is. Yeah,
I mean, it'd be great if we could get the thing, help get the thing reversed. I feel really bad for you. I have a pretty good understanding. These kinds of cases come up a lot where, there's an aggressor, and the question is whether the threat is of an ordinary physical injury or death or serious physical injury justifying threat or use of deadly physical force. And that can be that's a gray area a lot of times.
And there's also some other interesting defense statutes going on here too, because
you're in a car.
Different rights you have when you're in an occupied vehicle, for example. I'm sure you may have talked to one or two of your attorneys about that. So yeah, this is not a clear cut and dry case in any way, shape, or form, such as the current narrative promoted by USCCA seems to make it. So
yeah, and you'll have, once you get to the federal side, you'll be able to bring an ineffective assistance of counsel claim on the federal side. And, because I don't know what happened at trial. I don't know how your appellate attorney feels about how the trial attorney did. Maybe the trial attorney did a great job, maybe not. I don't know. But at this point, you got to fight everything. And so we're pretty creative lawyers. And if your lawyer wants to reach out and say, hey, Marc, Kayla tells us you're willing to we could bounce some ideas around. We're happy to set a time. And, just maybe if we could come up with anything at all that could help the case, we'd love to contribute.
We love doing federal habeas cases, too, because that's when you get to go through everything and bring up every single issue along the way and challenge every single point. And they're really fun, and you get to be creative and work under the federal guidelines. So yes, definitely let us know if we can help in any way.
I got to say,
Well, I pray we don't get that far.
Right. I
pray the Supreme Court just...
I got to say, I'm pretty impressed with your attitude about even if they offer me probation, I'm never going to agree. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to fight this thing, even while you're staring down the barrel of a life sentence. Plus, I think you said 30 years for the obstruction, which sounds unbelievably harsh to me. Just your attitude there, your courage there is really inspiring. And so again, we've never met before this, and we haven't talked before this, and I really appreciate you giving us an opportunity to kind of get to the bottom. I felt like probably you were being unfairly maligned, and when USCCA came out and essentially threw you under the bus and said all kinds of things that you did, it was just disgusting to me. I know he's not a lawyer and they're not a law firm, but I mean, to talk bad about even a customer, right? Because you're not a client of theirs, but to say the things they said to try to make themselves look better and throw you under the bus, I thought was just disgusting. So I'm glad we got an opportunity to, kind of meet you by video and chat with you and kind of get a little bit of your side of the story here. And I certainly hope things go well for you, and it'll be an awesome, excellent story someday if we can get this thing reversed somehow, for you to tell your story about what happened and all the obstacles you had to go through, not just fighting the criminal case, but dealing with the USCCA problem, thinking that you had all this coverage and a team and, people behind you, and then they pull the rug out from under you, notwithstanding the fact that the lawyer they give you says, I think it's a great case, and he's trying to advocate for you with USCCA to say, hey, this is a good case of self-defense. And I know that because I spoke to the guy, and that's exactly what he told us.
When he spoke to him, he was blown away. And this is a guy who's done many, many self-defense cases, and he thought that it was a very, very strong case. And he told us he was shocked that they said, sorry, we're cutting off your coverage. And so we knew something was wrong. We knew this guy's a great lawyer, too.
I wish you had been signed up in our program, Attorneys on Retainer. This is exactly the kind of case we love to take and fight. And my impression is you probably would have testified really well up on the stand. And my guess, just from observing you here, probably the jury would have really liked you. You seem very genuine to me, and I think you could have been presented in a way. And, it's tough sometimes when you don't testify at trial, even though the jury gets an instruction that you have a right not to testify and they shouldn't make an inference about that. They're still human, right? And so they think, well, why isn't she getting up here telling us her side of the story? So it's always a hard decision in a criminal trial to decide whether to take the stand or not. But as I observe you and hear you tell your story, man, I would have loved to have you up on the stand and even say, I wouldn't take any deal on this case. I don't care. Did they even offer you a deal on this case?
Never.
They never even offered you a plea.
Did.
Wow. Mm-mm. Yeah, I think.
But to be fair, I've always said I would not take it. It'd be a waste of their time. So maybe they heard that.
Wow. Unbelievable. Very few defendants take that kind of a position. So you must feel it's evidence of the fact that you feel very strongly about acting in self-defense here.
I do. And I always say it, God knows my heart, and God knows that if I would have been able to lock that door, I would not have had to pull that gun on him.
Yeah.
So I know my intentions were pure. I know that I didn't go there with a plot to kill this man. That was not my intentions of going that day. And because of that, I don't see that the Lord is going to make me stay here. So from the beginning, even though this has been a long journey, I still do not believe I'm spending life here.
Okay. Well, you make the best of it. You keep that attitude. You keep fighting. And more power to you. And again, anything we can do to help, would love to talk with your attorney just to share some ideas. We've done an awful lot of federal habeas, like Andy said. Hope it doesn't get there, but if it does, we've done a lot of those as well. And so I hope you stay in touch with us.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kayla.
Hang in there, Kayla. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow.
Dude, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. There's so much to process.
Oh
there.
my God! I feel like I got the juices flowing. I would have loved to have defended this case at trial.
Yeah.
I understand the argument. She used deadly physical force, and they probably, and I don't know this for sure, but they probably said she used too much force. But she's a female. He's an angry male. I don't know what the size differential. Sounds like there's an argument here. To me, this isn't a case that should have been dropped. You never get a perfect case of self-defense, right? This definitely, in my opinion, was at least an arguable case of self-defense.
Yeah, I completely agree, and so did her lawyer. But one thing's for sure, this certainly isn't the cut and dry, like, obvious first degree, obvious premeditated murder that the narrative that USCCA is pushing
I hope the people who got on, the videos we did and made comments and, made it sound like this was such a clear case of premeditated murder and pre-planned. I hope they watch who she is and what she had to say. I think it's pretty clear from that. At least this was an arguable case of self-defense. She should not have been left hanging.
Yeah, not one that should have been simply hung out to dry.
100% chance had she been an AOR client, we would have come with guns a-blazing on this case.
Well, Mark, we still may represent her someday. I hope she wins her appeal to the Supreme Court, obviously. But yeah, it would be exciting to work on the case in the federal habeas.
I hope she takes us up on our offer. I'd love to chat with her attorney, just put some time aside and just do a what about this, what about that. That's helpful to have another attorney or a couple attorneys to bounce some ideas off. Wouldn't it be great if this thing gets reversed and she gets released? What a story.
Yeah, and I think another good chance to reiterate why you shouldn't talk to the police after a self-defense incident. You heard her say it herself. If you had one thing to say, she's like, don't talk to the police.
Yeah, also it was pretty clear that they went after, the information from USCCA. This is why you can't talk to the person at USCCA. They're not a lawyer. So all that's discoverable. She made it pretty clear. That came into her trial. Hey, she's calling the USCCA. And just like, we're going to talk about with the Alan Coley case, prosecutor did everything in that case to, a subpoena to USCCA. We want all the statements, recordings, training records, everything else. This is the problem with using a club or an insurance company or really anything but a law firm for a criminal defense case. Both of these cases highlight some of the very serious problems.
Definitely safe to say we'll be following this very closely. We'll be following her appeal very closely. And who knows, maybe we'll talk to her again. I know that probably, this was kind of an impromptu thing, right?
Totally,
because,
100%.
She sent us a thing. We got it approved like within a day by the jail over there.
We didn't have one question prep, nothing. We got on. It was the first time we ever talked to her.
So I'm sure there's questions that, we got to be really careful, obviously. We don't want to in any way, shape, or form get into stuff that could affect her appeal. But I'm sure that we're going to think of more questions and that our audience will ask us to ask her more questions. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a follow-up interview, follow up with her, something like that. She seemed very willing to. So
blown away. The interview with Kayla Giles.
Yeah,
blown away is all I can say.
All right, everybody. This has been attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. Victor of the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm. Go and check out attorneysonretainer.us to learn all about our program. A program, by the way, which definitely would have covered Kayla Giles' case. I suspected it before, but after talking to her just now, I am certain of it. And you can learn the difference between a self-defense program that's backed by a real law firm rather than by an insurance company. And there are many, many differences that are highly relevant to a self-defense incident. Also, check out attorneysforfreedom.com to learn more about our law firm and our philosophy that drives our criminal representation. Until next time, attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. Victor.
Peace.